I'm fortunate to be joined today by Alexander Kobrin, renowned concert pianist and professor at Eastman. And that's where you're joining us from today, right? The Eastman School.
Yes, yeah, you don't want to see my home, so I'm here at my studio.
That's right. But so you don't ever sleep in this studio? You don't live in the studio ever?
Not today, not tonight.
Not today. Only when you have a big concert coming up. And we're also joined by Sergei Rachmaninoff in the background there. There's a small...
Yeah, you can see there are a lot of dead people on the walls, and Rachmaninoff is right there at the very end. But on the very last photo is my wonderful teacher, now Lev Naumov, and right before him is Rachmaninoff. And Naumov loved Rachmaninoff, so they're just perfect.
Very appropriate. We'll do another live stream someday where you just talk about the pictures on your wall. But today we're going to focus on Rachmaninoff, and in particular, a segment of his piano repertoire, which, would you say it's underplayed? It's hard. It's really hard, and it's not the Rachmaninoff of the movies, and that's his Études-Tableaux, Opus 33 and Opus 39. Now, Alexander was not only a medalist in the 2005 Clyburn, he was the gold medalist. And we all just watched this year's Clyburn competition through the miracle of YouTube. But actually, I remember the early days of internet streaming, and I followed the 2005 competition, and I remember distinctly your performance in the semifinals of Opus 33, Rachmaninoff. And I just remember thinking to myself, who would do that? Who even does that? So I thought we'd just start today by going back in time. And Dominic, if we could call up one of the shortest and probably most difficult, complex, you can talk about it if you want, challenging etudes, and that is E flat minor, Opus 33, number 5. Let's hear Alexander Kobrin play it. Okay, that was fast. You played fast back then. Have you slowed down your interpretation over time?
I don't think I played this etude since Clyburn, so I have no idea.
Really?
Well, I'm sure I'm playing slower now.
So this happens to some artists as they get older and wiser, is they sort of, expand their tempi a bit, maybe because there's more interesting things going on the inside of the music they want to show. Have you noticed that at all? Like repertoire you've played for a while, you kind of want to put on the brakes a little bit so you can demonstrate or illuminate different things in the music.
I think it relates to the way how we listen and how we hear things. I remember, working on something technically challenging, like, Rachmaninoff Concerti or his etudes, and the physiology, the technique is one of your top priorities in a way. You want to make sure that's in place, but then I guess when you get wiser, Not in my case, I never get wiser, but once you get older, I think the priority switches to more expression. And it's very interesting to have proof of it in a way, listening to recordings of the same piece by different pianists. Like my favorite example of that actually was the Gilels recording of Appassionata Sonata, which is extremely fast earlier and quite slow later. And both are very effective, actually. It's not like, he's playing first very flashy, and both have this energy and effect and excitement and really and depth. But I guess something changes in the speed how we hear things and what we want to express also.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that your agility has diminished. You're still a young man. I'm not calling you.
Thank you.
An old, decrepit, aging pianist here. So you haven't played Opus 33 since the Clyburn, at least not that one, not the full set.
Not entirely.
You've played Opus 39 in its entirety more recently.
Yes.
And I know this because I found you on YouTube doing it. My first question is just, at least here in the States, in the West, perhaps, you don't see a lot of performances of the full Rachmaninoff etudes, either opus, all at once kind of thing. You see more Chopin etude performances, even Liszt transcendentals. You're starting to see more and more of that. Is this something that's more popular in Russia? Where did you get this wild idea, and when did you start working on these particular pieces?
Well, I started working on 39 when I was still in the conservatory, and I never had this idea of playing them entirely in one concert, but I did work with my professor on 33 entirely and some of 39. I guess, as everywhere, it's been a tradition of playing these etudes as audition pieces, and some sort of exams. And you mentioned earlier you don't really hear them much. Well, I do hear them every year in big numbers, and I think that's where probably the answer is, that people treat Études-Tableaux as something compatible to a showcase of technique, as you would think of Liszt, as you would think of Chopin, despite the fact that Chopin's etudes are, of course, beautiful and profound pieces, but a lot of them are, just wonderful to play and to showcase your touch, which is very particular in Chopin's case, and that's what makes those etudes difficult. In Rachmaninoff's case, for me at least, and I think that's what makes some challenges for people to relate to. Technique is just Rachmaninoff's language. The technical challenges he puts in front of you. This is his pianism. This is the nature of his pianism, which of course has roots, Chopin, Liszt. I wouldn't say Scriabin, although they were pretty close. Rachmaninoff loved Scriabin, and he played him, even though he was blamed for playing him in a way Rachmaninoff liked to play, very rhythmic. But yeah, this is his language, and we find a lot in the texture, a lot of beauty and a lot of expression inside the texture. Some people see it a little bit overweight. Some people maybe are afraid to perform 40 minutes of music that somehow is weird. Let's face it, this music is very strange. And I think I would even say that these etudes are the only etudes. And by the way, this is the only example, I wouldn't say the only, but the first example when a composer comes up with this term, Études-Tableaux, picture etude. Yeah, we understand that Liszt has program music and he names his etudes, and we have titles for Chopin's, but actual message, to send the actual message to the audience. This is not about exercise. This is about a certain picture which composer puts on the page and expresses it through the means of Rachmaninoff. Absolute astonishing pianism.
Yeah, in a way, everything Rachmaninoff wrote is an etude, is what you're saying, and I not in a negative sense.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is everything Rachmaninoff wrote is not an etude.
What I mean is in the sense that it's like you said, his language is technical, in the sense that
language is very complex pianistically, definitely.
Yeah.
I think Rachmaninoff, if you compare Rachmaninoff with Russian, let's talk about, so Rachmaninoff is a Russian composer, and when we talk about Russian composer, the first thing we think of, me being grown up in Russia, the first thing you think of is a song, a Russian song. And in many ways, there is Orthodox singing, church music. There is old believers' chants, which were listening to music in a very different way than our contemporary kind of traditional academic way. Yeah, they were not going by octaves; they were going by quarts, by four, and that creates absolutely amazing melodies. And so you look at Rachmaninoff. If you compare his melody with Tchaikovsky, let's say, or with Mussorgsky or Glinka or any other composer of 19th century, his melodies are rather tight, I would say. They're sometimes, and we will see it on the example of these etudes, sometimes, very rare, he writes this long, beautiful line. But expression inside that line is very contained, and the texture around it makes this whole picture complete and absolutely contributes to the whole idea of the piece. And Rachmaninoff being on this cliff of 19th century, 20th century, he had a lot of troubles with fitting in. And as we know of him talking about his contemporaries and the music that he hears around him and the dissonance and cacophony of the time. And yet his language is quite difficult maybe for some to put in the proportion on the keyboard, if you know what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of details, enormous amount of detail, which are not in the melody. Melody is pretty, if you set it apart, it's very simple. And we can talk about it later too, on the example of etudes. But
yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lack of this sort of long, the long line melodies that we know from, I guess, second and third piano concertos most famously. But it, perhaps not coincidentally, one of the most famous Études-Tableaux does have one of these more soaring melodies, the E flat minor in Opus 39. So do you think that one's popularity stems in part from that singing tune? Already I noticed multiple people are asking about that one in particular, I think because it has this kind of typical Rachmaninoff passion, and yet there's so much detail, so much going on in the inner voices and shaping that really the substance of the work is not in developing that theme, in a traditional sense. And maybe you could just show us a little bit of that one because it's so popular. Everybody wants to know it as a demonstration, of detail in Rachmaninoff's score.
Well, since everybody's asking about number 5, which of course is very popular, I guess also because of the of something they can relate to. But yes, you said passion, yeah. And interesting enough, Rachmaninoff doesn't put any tempo there, and what he says there is appassionato. And this. Well, you said very long. Well, I said very long line. Let's see how many notes he's using. It's very limited. There is.
Yeah, it's not rock too.
This is a very different nature of melody, yeah. And here, of course, we have this appassionato molto marcato, the melody, and lots of syncopations and triplets under it. To me, this etude stands a little bit outside of this whole concept of the Opus 39. I see Opus 39 as a single piece. I see it as a cycle that has very precise proportion and very interesting development. In a way, this becomes some sort of a middle episode of this long tragic story. And now I cannot hear you.
Yeah, it's like, so it stands right there in the middle, like this island.
Yeah, it stands right there in the middle. It stands right there in the middle, and the whole book, the whole cycle is very dark. And this one, in a way, is the most, how should I say, most passionate, most open, most exposed, maybe, in this longing and this being torn apart, being feel of conflict, premonition of a tragedy. It's pretty tragic. And when we say appassionato, like in Beethoven sonata, yeah, appassionato, and what other cases we can think of, I don't know, where it's not passion in the sense of sentiment. It's a passion, it's sort of a tragic impulse, it's this despair, yeah. And of course here he has it in the full scale. What's interesting about this etude is that, first of all, in Opus 39, every etude is in minor key except one. And that one is the very last one. Here, the only time he ends the piece in major key. There are a lot of going back and forth in terms of tonalities. There is a very long constant journey from one key to another, which results in this return to the main theme. Flats, sharps, back and forth. Extremely powerful and painful music. But the end, yeah, the coda is absolutely unplayable because he writes pesante molto marcato for everything pretty much. Like if the sky collapses on you. Absolutely mad and results in as if the sea and the theme of the sea, the water, the ocean in Rachmaninoff music is essential, and it's also essential in this opus. The sea comes down, and you know, again, lots of times I hear this etude as an audition piece, but not a lot I hear people relating with the image, you know. And this piece, as we mentioned, you know, stands right in the middle of this Opus 39, which, to me, I see it as a sense of a catastrophe that is coming to Russia, to Rachmaninoff himself. Lots of premonition, lots of darkness and death.
He wrote these right before the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah, he premiered this set in February 1917. And for him, you know, not just the fact of Bolsheviks coming to power, but his own people who work for him, his own farmers, his own people who he owned as a upper class citizen. He did a lot of things for them, and they, you know, well, you know the story how they threw his piano from the second floor, and it was just not safe. His own people turned against him, and he had to save his family. And I think all of it had a huge impact on Rachmaninoff. And this whole Opus 39 has so many, not just dark images, but images of death, of hopelessness, of fight, of escape. And that's why when people play Red Riding Hood, yeah, we can talk about that too, because it's a very bizarre image of Red Riding Hood and a wolf in the midst of this. To me, when I hear, well, I have small kids and they love this story, and when I read the story to them, and it's kind of a strange subject to put in such dark
and
music.
Just to clarify for the viewers, that you're talking about the next etude.
Yeah, I'm talking about the next one who migrated to this set from Opus 33.
Oh, really? So this A minor was originally...
Yes, the A minor was originally in Opus 33. And funny enough, and now, you know, Rachmaninoff, a lot of people who don't understand Rachmaninoff, they say, well, he was very lazy. He didn't like to write new music, so he was busy rearranging his own. And often he did it quite well, because originally the etude started here. That was the beginning. And then, starting with the Red Riding Hood, like she's running away. And then he added this. The reason we know about the Red Riding Hood, because Rachmaninoff, who, as we know, did not like to express himself. He did not like to tell what images he had about his music. He always said, you know, I like when artists are having their own ideas. But we have to thank Mr. Respighi, who asked him, who wanted to put etudes on for the orchestra, transform to the orchestra, and he asked in his letter what the idea behind it. And this etude is one of the etudes when Rachmaninoff did specify the image. And total 5 etudes he mentioned what he wanted to see there. One from 33 and 4 from 39. And we will talk about that too, because this is absolutely fascinating. And I think knowing those facts make people think about this music a little differently, you know. not as an etude by no means. But yes,
Right.
this is a very challenging piece.
Of course. I mean, they all are, but I guess in particular this. Actually, let's pause and zoom out a bit. I want to acknowledge the viewers and those who are commenting and asking questions. There's a lot of people who wish they could play this music like you, or approach your level to the point where you can just think about imagery. I mean, the way you just surveyed Opus 39 number 5 with ease. We want to get to that level. And Michael Coolin here is asking about the rhythmical subtlety and the complexity inside of Rachmaninoff's textures, which you have to render with ease if you're going to do any of these, paint any of these pictures that you're discussing. Could we just talk shop for a few minutes? We have another tonebase subscriber who asks the question that's related. Dear Mr. Kobrin, if any, what or which exercises or etudes would you recommend before working on the Rachmaninoff Études-Tableaux, Opus 39, 1, 5, and 9 in particular? So he's talking about this one as well. So let's just step back. Let's talk technique for a second. How can we begin to approach these pieces if we're advanced pianists who haven't quite gotten to this level? What do you recommend to your students? I'm sure you work with them. They're aspiring to play these pieces. And then we'll do a U-turn and come back to the meanings.
Well, exercises are recommending squats. You start with squats in the morning, and absolutely stretches. It's a hard question because, of course, as kids, and when we were growing up and we're studying, and my teachers, there is no a particular magical potion to play Rachmaninoff. You start with Czerny, 299 and 740, and you go to Chopin etudes, and you do scales and do Chopin etudes, and I think it's important to understand the nature of this technique. And for example, I hope every pianist, and this is what I'm always encouraging to my students to do, is to practice Chopin etudes. And why Chopin? Because it is not, to me, it is not less challenging. It is not less challenging than Rachmaninoff and Liszt in many ways, because it has such a particular touch of Chopin pianism, this unique Chopin pianism like no other. And you cannot play 3 forte, or 2 forte, forte più possibile. He writes on several occasions, Chopin. The same sound you do it with Liszt or Rachmaninoff. It's very difficult task, and I think the understanding what kind of sound you want, and what is the root of that pianism. And with Rachmaninoff case, to me, of course, he was inspired by Chopin. Practice Chopin etudes if you can, because obviously you have to be at the level of pianistic technique, and I think the sound and the touch matters, because a lot of times what I observe with my students, if we go more practical, there are a lot of them being very tense and not really understanding the connection of the entire body playing the piano, because they think that they move fingers and everything else is completely locked and unengaged, or they sit on the edge and they lean forward and putting on their entire weight on the keyboard, or they move with no purpose, because it's just they love music and the wrist goes up and down, up and down. And so there are a lot of that kind of work, I think, important, basically, to kind of make the long story short, to understand that every sound you want to make and every motion contributes to it. So literally, how you sit, how far, how close, our different physiology of each individual contributes to that.
I noticed that you're quite still and focused when you play, and
because I didn't practice for a long time this piece itself. I have to be focused on the
piano. No, but I also watched through your Opus 33 again. I had a little Clyburn watch party by myself. And you're down near the keyboard, but it's like you're you're dealing with very fine materials, and you'll change the shape of your hand or your finger to create a certain sound. So it's like you're conjuring the sound from the keyboard, but the mechanism is calm. You're not emoting and swaying. And I think we see that a lot with pianists of a certain level who really want to express themselves. And this music is so expressive, and yet to actually play it well, you can't be moving all over the place.
A lot of things. Well, I would just say everything happens on your fingertip. There are millions of tone touches available to you on your fingertips, and of course the rest of your body should be loose. I always compare playing piano with swimming, and when you swim, you have to be absolutely relaxed. You have to be absolutely loose, otherwise you sink. And the same thing with playing the piano, especially considering pianos of 19th century. This is also important to remember. I'm absolutely certain that the way how these composers been writing was connected to the way, what kind of instrument they had available. And the touché, the French word touché, started with Chopin, where those pianos were light. And I'm absolutely certain that Liszt would not write the way he did if he had our modern, I don't know, Fazioli or something, high Fazioli, because it's just simply a different approach to the sound. We read in letters that Marie Dagout had to spend money, tons of money, for piano repair after each house concert Liszt did. It was too much. And also, so then the question is, how much effort do we put into the keyboard? How much physical effort and muscle and weight is needed for this kind of music? Yeah, we see, he writes, and in number 5 he writes, forte marcato, molto marcato, pesante, fortissimo, heavy and very strong. But is it about the weight of the arm, or is it about the sonority, the gravitas of the moment? Is it? I often suggest feeling the big sound rather than trying to be loud. You see, and I think it's a lot of this to it. Talking about Rachmaninoff's texture in Pianistic's texture, I always hear his symphonic works. And the maneuvering between, somebody mentioned the rhythmic complexity, Rachmaninoff unique rubato in a sense. Just listen to him conducting and listen to his symphonic music. I think that's the best example which I follow when I hear his piano music. Again, the sense of body being relaxed and avoiding unnecessary motion. I think that's the key. Watch pianists of the 20th century. Watch Rubinstein, watch Michelangelo, watch Rachmaninoff. We cannot really watch Rachmaninoff, but we know, we see photos, we know recollection. Scriabin, composer who writes this music that flies around. We see portraits and the recollection how he sits. He's absolutely far away from the keyboard. Yes, hands go here, but he never reaches leaning forward. So the sense of having music under your fingers. That's probably the best advice I could give. And of course, slow practice. Practice slow.
We know the anecdote of Rachmaninoff practicing the thirds etude so slowly it was unrecognizable. Of course, I'm sure most people practice slowly, but not all slow practice is created equal. I mean, there's a certain kind of concentration needed, so that what you're doing actually will end up informing your playing when you get up to speed. There's so many good comments, so many good questions, because this is fascinating for people. I'm going to do my best to sort of jump around, but still make this coherent. I do want to just say, in about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 15, I want to get into the structure of these works. What we're going to do is take more of a tour through 33, and then for 39, we're going to look at sort of a framework of certain etudes. So before we get there, just keeping on technique a little longer, I was actually reading a Conversations with Pletnev the other day, and he made an interesting comment about Chopin etudes and Liszt etudes. He says something is essentially that he points out Liszt etudes grow out of Czerny. And so the passage work is more positional. And he says, look, you can master Liszt etudes if you master the positions, essentially. But with Chopin etudes, it defies positions. It's very plastic. I wonder if you agree with that and where Rachmaninoff fits into that schema. Is he more plastic? Is he more positional? Or does he really draw from both? Because, of course, he was inspired by both of these composers.
Well, of course, I agree with Mikhail Pletnev. Yes, in the sense that Chopin's technique requires much more sensitivity of the fingertip. And positional, yeah, we just see it on the page, yeah, in Liszt work. Rachmaninoff, I think, as you already answered, lies in both. I would say though, working on the fingering in Rachmaninoff, I would lean towards a particular position, but it's very not logical sometimes. Like, for example, we know this rule. We all were taught no thumb on the black key, avoid thumb on the black key. Well, in Rachmaninoff, it's always thumb on the black key. But again, it's not because you want this note to be banged or anything, but just it's easier to phrase the way how he writes. So it seems to me almost like he doesn't really care what fingers he... Well, yeah, Rachmaninoff didn't have to care what finger he uses. His pianism is, of course, legendary. But yes, I would say, well, let's just take an example here. It is position. Yeah? And at the same time, you have piano leggero. So I really have to be light on the key and hoping that this piano will give me the repetition, which doesn't happen. So there is also fingertip work on this very light textures. Now, if you take the number 5, yeah, it is a position of the hand that allows you connect your melody, but at the same time, you cannot just use separate fingers for the melody and for the chord inside. So basically, you connecting with 5, 5, 5, 5 on top, which is, well, legato is not possible. Connection is not possible with the 5, 5, 5. And but again, and that's where this moment of technique versus listening, as I mentioned, comes into play, because I can tell you more. Legato, connection simply is not possible in this instrument, technically speaking. Yeah, the hammer beats the string, and all these connecting happening in our ears, in our imagination, foremost. And then
it's always an illusion, right? You're creating
pretty much an illusion, yes. And we work with pedal, we work with our listening between the notes. Rachmaninoff is a champion of writing a hairpin on the long note. Well, thank you very much, maestro. Yeah, but there is obvious idea behind it. He's not trying to show how smart he is. He's not trying to tell you how dumb you are, although he does it anyway. And the idea of the sound progressing, which is possible on any other instrument, and primarily the voice. And so listening, how do I balance? Yeah, technical question. How do I balance the melody and the chord? Well, I'm listening for my soprano, for my song. Here. I want to make sure that I don't play this heavy enough, too heavy to cover the long note. I don't know if it comes through. And that's why the climax of the piece is very difficult, because there he almost doesn't give you any choice. The melody has all potential to be covered by, which Rachmaninoff, with his absolute phenomenal music intellect, puts above the melody. And writing heavy, pesante, almost telling you, well, okay, melody is fine with one line, no chord, and everything else is all this upper line, almost if it tells you, well, now that's the main thing here. Yeah, that creates. So technique should not be seen away from the musical context. And I wish there was a simple solution. Okay, well, now let's play 5 notes this way, you know, that's what scales are for when you're growing up. You know, my 6-year-old now doing scales, he hates it, of course. But
are you his teacher?
No.
Good.
No. This is the only wise thing I did in my life. I do not teach my students, my kids.
But what you're saying is like there's no like manual for getting, you know, with step 1, step 2, step 3, this is how you get to playing Rachmaninoff with sonority and expression. I mean, there's no straight line to get there. It's not so simple. You can't just write a handbook for it.
It's not so simple. Of course, I wish I knew the background of the person who's asking the question.
Well, that's part of the trouble here is we're speaking to a whole variety of viewers. And so I'm tasked with somehow representing a very diverse mass of people here, but at least some of these questions are pretty universal, even if you're speaking to people at very different levels. One is from Robin. It's about voicing, and actually it's from Ustad Spencer Tracy. Robin, I'll get to you. Voicing, pedaling, and experimenting with them. It seems like what the big message right now is use your ear. Let the ear guide you. Yeah. But when it comes to voicing, it's also very much a physical sensation to attach the ear to this tone being this gradation louder than this other set of tones. The pedal having many gradations itself. Do you ever remember practicing voicing by itself, or was it always a matter of having a musical idea and wanting to render it at the piano in different contexts?
I was always trained to have a perfect idea of the tone before you touch the key. And then if you have a complex chord, let's say, then you voice it according to what is the task there. What is the primary line, or there are maybe several. The best exercise for voicing is Bach fugues. Nothing is better than practicing Bach fugues and setting them aside separately, or each voice individually, and practice them. Let's say you have fugue of 4 voices, so you practice 2 voices, and then you sing one. It is very interesting and rather difficult exercise, but exciting. To sing one voice and play others, or to sing, to play 2 voices and sing one, and then exchange it. So it creates this absolutely horizontal sense of seeing things. We're not thinking of a chord, we're thinking of lines. And Rachmaninoff is the best example of this as well. When you look at the score, you see lines, you don't see chords. When there are chords, like, let's say, in D major, the very last one, wonderful bells, Somebody said, every chord in Rachmaninoff is a bell, which I don't think is very far from the truth.
Yeah, I've heard worse generalizations than that, so.
And so what you see here, I'm going to play as if we don't know what he's writing on the score, So we have 4, let's say, 4 beats in the bar. And then you look in the score and he writes 2 lines. One line is this. Another line is offbeat. one line is half notes, another line is quarter notes. So immediately seeing that, I would not be considering applying absolutely the same weight on every chord. Yeah. Or if I'm bored and I want to do something else, I would do. Yeah. Why not?
I like it. Yeah.
There you go. See, thank you.
But the point is they're distinct. They're, whether you make it less or more, they're distinct sonorities, and then you can hear the layer.
Well, because it cannot be nice and charming. You know, it says tempo di marcia molto marcato fortissimo. Yeah, and it's the last piece of the Opus 39, written in D major, which is extraordinary turns of events, considering how dark the piece is. And the key, I'm sure, is not, the tonality is not coincidence or a very random choice. So yeah, so basically, if you look at the Rachmaninoff score, you see how meticulous he is, how detailed he is with articulation marking, and something that I'm sure he took from impressionists. If you try to really make your ear being obsessed with these details, then I am certain that your body follows. I'm absolutely certain that the body follows our ear and our brain. The best example of this I always give to my students. I'm so proud of this example. I always tell it in any interview. When you walk on the street and you have to make a turn, let's say you have to make a right turn, do you actually think how many degrees you turn your torso and you twist your ankle? You don't think these things. You think you need to turn right. And you think of this because you know you have to make that turn. You're not sightseeing. You have the goal and you're turning right. It's exactly the same thing. It's important to know what the goal is. Yeah, we have to get the half notes and quarter notes. Yeah, in the in a different way. Then we have dots and tenutos. Yeah, so we want that, and we want to make sure. I did not think how heavy or light my finger was. Well, maybe because I'm 42 and I've been doing this for too long. But this is also how we teach young people. To have the ear be your judge and a guide, and then once you're thinking of the ear, your body instinctively lets go. You see?
And I think it's really important because not every student is even listening to recordings, to going to performances. They're going into piano because there's somebody told them they're good at it. So there's this isn't everybody, but I've noticed this phenomenon of piano students who aren't aware of the richness of the music at this level. And on that note, there's some interesting questions here about listening, but not from the perspective of the pianist, but from the audience, from the listener. Tammy acknowledges, well, she confesses that she finds these etudes challenging to listen to, even though she loves Rachmaninoff. What would you, and I know what she's talking about. This was not the first Rachmaninoff that I reached for, when I was younger. So do you think sort of looking at these details, maybe opening the score, so that you can sort of tune your ear into all of the subtle things Rachmaninoff is doing, that would help the pianist, of course, but it seems like that kind of work is almost necessary for a listener to really grasp what's going on? Or do you think that are there ways of listening to this music that are more heightened, that have more depth? And how can somebody who's used to Rock 2 or the G minor prelude sort of start to grab a hold of this kind of music, which you said yourself is weird, right?
I think from the listener's perspective, our ear catches something very natural and simple. That's why it's very easy to remember, Rossini melodies or Mozart melodies. Yeah, they're written in a way that are very accessible. Chopin. Why Chopin is so popular? Well, as Alan Walker wrote in his book, and I think it's very true. You know, we can bet money that in the range of 50 miles from here, somebody is practicing Chopin right now. And the phenomena of this is in this absolutely natural and simple melody, which we relate to emotionally. Rachmaninoff case, yes, you said Rachmaninoff, the second concerto, the second theme or the first theme. Even in the third concerto, the main theme, although it's more complex, it's very easy to relate to. Here, you said number 5. Why number 5? Well, melodically, it's the one who you can emotionally easier to relate to. Others are, where is the melody? And I think that alone makes the audience go, whoa, that's like a noise to me. And then if you attend the concert or you're really curious about the work, I think you can do your research of the history of the piece, background of the piece. Of course, knowing other works help. Knowing more of a composer, listening to early Rachmaninoff, later Rachmaninoff, his late Russian period, yeah, and sort of educate yourself how the sound evolved and what is really happening inside the music. And like I said before, we mentioned the letters and Rachmaninoff's remarks on each etude. And if you read those, things are getting much clearer and fascinatingly clearer. Let's say, how about I throw a bone, yeah, there. So we have this beginning. The etude number 1 in C minor. Well, we have another example of the piece that starts in F minor but is written in C minor. Is this. And now let's listen. It's exactly the same harmony, but in the very different texture. So things, and now what? You see, and then more questions arise and more answers out there. It's fascinating process, and maybe that if you go with the music that you cannot really relate to, if you penetrate the history and look for background answers, and especially in Rachmaninoff's music, a lot of this, we're talking about Études-Tableaux, yeah, pictures. A lot of this is, I'm sure, inspired by paintings, and there are some recollections, word of mouth, or which could be trusted, or his own words that guide us to a particular painting, and we can see, you know, or there is a certain melody, or a certain like Dies Irae, for example. Yeah, we meet in the second etude. Well, immediately, if you know that, yeah, immediately you understand this piece is not something very happy or melancholic. Yeah, no, it's heavy. And why is it heavy? The question is, why is it heavy? And what's happening here? And so on and so on. And basically that's more of a research or like a scientist in Egypt pyramids going with a monitor or the sensor or double glass looking for clues. Yeah, there are a lot of clues there.
So there's definitely there has to be entry points into any composer's music. I mean, you don't start with the Grosse Fuge to get into Beethoven. I mean, you know, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, at least. So, and it's not saying anything about the music except sorry?
Already how it sounds, Grosse Fuge. Why would you go in there? It's just...
Right. So, and actually, we're talking about connections between the etudes and concerti, and watch me segue right now. Y'all ready for this segue? Okay, here we go. The fourth concerto is not well known. My teacher in college assigned it to me. He said, "Yeah, why don't you play the fourth?" Like, what? There's a fourth? I immediately reached for a Michelangelo recording, and this is now I started to understand it better. This second movement of the fourth concerto, actually, the material from a passage in it is Opus 33, number 3. There is I mean, I don't know if it's note for note or if it's the same key. You would know better than I would, but he actually recycles the music. I don't know what came first. I think the etude came first, and then the concerto came later. But let's move to 33 and let's start our little tour.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about 39. We're going to end with 39, but I want to come back to it and visit Opus 33, written a few years earlier, right around the time he had just written Rock 3 and was performing that. But not as close to the war hadn't begun yet. Scriabin was still alive, right? So there were different conditions, and the music, although still very complex, it's hard to tell if this belonged to Opus 33 or 39. There are differences, aren't there? I mean, well, let's walk through 33 if you want to just give us
I think there
be our tour guide and sort of take us through them.
Again, it's a lot of things that I kind of we see in this music are subjective, and I think it should be that way. We all interpreting this music, and we feel something of our own, something that we can relate to. We, as who we are in terms of our upbringing and all that, and there are so many instances of that you mentioned in Rachmaninoff's music. Speaking of Opus 33, to me, it is an interesting case where, first of all, the question is Rachmaninoff was very particular about 3 etudes being removed, and it's important to point out that they were brought back to the set not by Rachmaninoff, and I think does it make the set better, fuller? Maybe in this instance, to me, Opus 33 is not as connected within as Opus 39. To me, Opus 33 probably can be related to a more impressionistic way of looking at it. He just finished Opus 32 Preludes, and let's say, if I want to jump a little bit, you have a beautiful prelude, and you have etude number 2. So there's obvious kind of, as you said, recycling of certain elements, sort of linguistic elements of this composer. He starts with very kind of typical, in a way, speaking of melodies, and a lot of things that I already said. Now I'm looking at this a little bit differently. So you have the melody. This is the theme of the piece. Speaking of long Rachmaninoff and beautiful Rachmaninoff lines, well, I'm sorry, what is this? And so on. There is Rachmaninoff right there, and he starts with this rather maybe horse riding. Obviously, the feeling of something, to me, something old, if I may say. This set, I would think of more archaic Russia, of medieval times, of the old ballads, old fairy tale stories. Very, very mysterious in a way. Also. There are elements in this first etude etude, which everything has in Rachmaninoff in these two sets. You have the march, sort of, more or less. Something that has this pace, very resilient pace. You have bells. Yeah, lots of very sturdy ending. Rachmaninoff ends, this is very typical Rachmaninoff's ending. In Russian language there is a very bad slang on words on this, so I'm not going to illustrate it on your wonderful show. But another way we could think of the way how Rachmaninoff ends his letter to Respighi, he says, "That is all." And so maybe we can think, that is all. That's it. And then he goes to this second etude. Many images you can have. You can have the painting of the water. You can have the idea of the small bells on the horse, troika, the famous Russian three-horse, the carriage. Tchaikovsky writes it here. In his seasons. And here, for me also, in his prelude.
Yeah, I can see it coming. I can see the...
Yeah. And maybe here... beautiful picture. The question is, where is this troika, this carriage takes us? And I will be talking about this dark premonition of Rachmaninoff since the very beginning. I truly believe that he had this sense of a catastrophe, and the sense that he probably could not explain to himself why he has this ideas. It's reflected in his music, and I will show you later where exactly. Speaking of background, it starts very, should we say normal, should we say peaceful, I don't know.
I'm not at peace hearing that. I mean, there's so much tension already. Yeah.
But then let's see what's happening with this tension later. So he has. He writes appassionato è sempre più mosso. So again, the question of appassionato, passionate and constantly increasing the speed, the motion, as if he gets into this agony here. And he reaches this, he keeps going. And then we should say, after this agony, we go to E flat minor, because that was the order for Rachmaninoff to publish these etudes, which creates this third.
So if the
I
third
don't
and fourth,
understand.
the third and fourth were inserted.
He wrote them down, opened his drawer, put it inside a drawer, closed the drawer, and threw out the key. And only later, you may consider them posthumous. Yeah, Opus 3 number 4. The A minor, the third etude that did not fit this etude, he just purposely moved to Opus 39, I already said. I don't have any explanation, and I talked to a wonderful musician about this, seeking for opinion why Rachmaninoff did not include this to Opus 33. Especially one of my favorite D minor, number 4 in this book.
Sometimes the number 5.
Yes, and so there is no explanation. I am very happy that he didn't burn them, he didn't destroy them. Yeah, he just put it in his drawer. And here we have a wonderful case of, again, something that you can imagine. It's a very interesting case, C minor piece, most of it in C major. And we can talk about paintings having a certain perspective. When you look at the painting, there is something close and something further away. The beginning, another etude in the minor key. To jump forward, there will be again only one etude in the major key, and that would be the E flat major.
Not counting the C major?
Well,
Oh, are we?
I mean, I don't know. Is it the C major?
I mean the previous etude.
You mean this one? Well,
yeah. Immediately A flat or something else. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you're right, technically speaking. But
yeah.
Where is the major?
Right.
Where is it? I mean, yeah. This is how we finish. Were you thinking about C major when you were playing it? No.
Well, I mean, I never think about C major in Rachmaninoff, even if it's in C major. Like you're
That's a good point. But this is a thing, yeah. It's so.
Except the end of Rock 2. That's very C major.
Well, we also think about D major in Rock 3, and we think of D major here in 39, and C major here as well in C minor. So you can say it's a sort of maybe a flip, yeah, of the tonality. Here in C minor we have mostly C major in a beautiful 3 piano. It's very difficult. You have this endless lines in 3 piano, molto tranquillo, very, very, very quiet. Yeah, almost as if it's a peace before the storm, or quietness before the storm, and the storm will happen. Well, I mean, depends which order you go in. Yeah, but D minor. Again, speaking of marches, which he loved. The key D minor in Rachmaninoff is essential, I think. Essential for many reasons. I mean, in many examples, the key D minor itself, to me, is a key. You can find many pieces about death written in the key of D minor. Yeah, and I would probably mention 3 examples of D minor. Well, 4 in this instance. Yeah, we can talk about of course, his 3rd concerto, but also his 1st sonata, which is written in time where he could not take the 1905 and 1906 revolution, and he left. Yeah, and he writes this very strange music in D minor. Speaking of melodies, also not very beautiful. Then you have this D minor. Then you have D minor Opus 8, number 8, Opus 39, which also has something absolutely painful about it. And again, this he gives us the idea, many ideas here. You can think of sea. You can think of nature. You can think of something very lonely, and winter. And speaking of winter, somebody suggested a snowstorm in our number 3 or number 5. Presto is very scary. This winter storm in Russian poetry, and in general, the nature in Russian poetry, wind plays a big role. And there is one poem by Russian poet Fet that talks about the winter storm, and where does it take you, and how disastrous everything ends. I'm not going to be translating the poetry into English, but if you Google Fet winter storm, you will find it's quite interesting.
At least this storm is not too long.
Oh, the storm is very brief. Yeah.
Yeah.
The main storm comes later.
What's
The
that?
main storm comes as Opus 39. That's basically the whole storm.
I want to respect the fact that you have to teach in a little bit. So if you could fast forward through the last 3, I hate to ask you to do that, just so that we can spend some time in Opus 39 to talk about the structure of it. So
last 3, E flat major, the etude which Rachmaninoff did specify, a fair, or a festival. Very, you can see it, this brilliance and this little chaos of the fair. For some reason, I have the idea about what I hear this piece. I hear another one. The Tchaikovsky Seasons, which is also a festival, and this is very positive piece. It's a beautiful, very positive piece. And then the etude G minor. There is a little story there, because in one letter, Rachmaninoff says about gloomy morning, and he puts, speaking of etudes, and he puts gloomy morning, and he puts D minor. Etude D minor. Looking at both D minor etudes and I don't think there is a gloomy morning. The way how it's written, it could be easily mistaken for G. And so there is a theory that Rachmaninoff is actually meant G minor. And the G minor is here, gloomy morning.
It has to be.
It has to be.
Yeah. Also, do you think the end of this one is inspired by Chopin Ballade?
You stole my joke.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why did you have to ruin
Oh
it?
boy.
My goodness. Okay.
Oh, my
We're
regrets.
finished now. We're done. Yes, of course, the famous, almost a quote. And you want to. Yeah.
Well, at least we know what he was practicing on that gloomy morning.
Absolutely, yeah. He was practicing Chopin First Ballade. And finally, we have C sharp minor, grave, bells, a very strange piece. To me, this is absolutely a premonition of a disaster that would come a little bit later.
He could really tell that the world. He could really tell there were a lot of disasters coming.
Yeah, not only to the world, but
to his life, yeah.
To his life, to the life of people around him, to his country, because the changes he observed happening in his country, he never welcomed, and he saw everything as basically arriving to a catastrophe. Let's not to forget that it's not only the revolution, it's also the First World War, which will be in its prime when he is writing Opus 39. And all of it, I think, is this absolute agony and fear in many ways. Almost, almost could be. You know, it's absolutely horrifying. And speaking of texture, yeah, speaking of melodies. It's almost as if he quit caring about the sound. He quit caring about anything. It's just a collapse of sound. He just throws the piano off the second floor, as happened to his own instrument by his own people. And so, gradually getting into Opus 39, which to me, especially symbolic in our days, where we have something similar happening to Russia that was happening when Rachmaninoff was writing this set, and when he was leaving Russia, this absolute losing everything that was precious to him, losing his world. His world was collapsing, and this entire set to me is about that. And I'll try to be quite a kind of brief going through this etude. I don't know how much time we have, but
it's really up to you on some level. I don't know when exactly.
We can just do a very brief tour.
Sure. People have been asking about this first one in particular, so it's one of the more played etudes, but yeah, very interested to hear you.
Very popular among students for auditions. Everybody is playing very loud and very fast. But it starts piano, and we already discovered this, the key. If you ask me what to imagine, I would imagine this. The storm. Again, the wind. Schumann said the wind, yeah? Over graveyard, the wind of the graveyard.
But also I always notice with this one, the syncopations really propel.
Oh yeah, that's again, speaking of looking into the score, there are tenutos here, here, and then that B natural gives you goosebumps right there. Now, if we're going to be very, very detailed, if we're looking really carefully, I always like this moment at the end where we're going almost hear D series here. In the left hand. It's absolutely horrifying. And then the next one is the etude where again Rachmaninoff gives the description to Respighi. He says sea and seagulls, and he again, speaking of connection, as I mentioned before, I think these 9/8 pieces are very connected. You almost can start this etude with no break. Let's say. And it starts with our wonderful and happy melody called Dies Irae. Yeah. Again, sea and seagulls, but very different sea this time. Very kind of quiet. And there is, well, for when I was growing up and going to the Russian Museum and the Tretiakov Gallery, there was this constant acquaintance with artist named Aivazovsky, who was writing sea all the time, and water, and beautiful, small, big, all sorts of things. And there is one painting where the sea is not ugly, and it's not stormy. It's very, very, very quiet. But there is a ship there where it almost gives the sense of the storm is coming because there is no sail. And we know that if there is no sail, then with the sail you cannot really help the storm. And so it almost gives this feeling it's not peaceful, it's not calm. It's very quiet, and this melody. And so on. It does have the climax later on, but very brief. And it ends, interestingly, in a very kind of beautiful, sort of nice gesture. And he ends with the triad. Knowing how religious Rachmaninoff was and how religion was inspiring him, and the history of religion and history of Russia inspired him, and almost his obsession with the triad here, which was always a symbol of a cross. And you hear a lot of crosses in this music, including our beloved cross of BACH, BACH, Bach cross. We will get to it very briefly. Now, not spending too much time, this is very exciting etude. Again, we can talk of the storm, maybe. It's allegro morto, very powerful. What's interesting about this etude is this theme. It's somewhere else. So again, nothing is, well, we can think of it's a coincidence, but probably not. Very different feeling, but very desperate. In this
Lots of meter changes in this one. I know. Is that common to a lot of these etudes, or is it this one in particular that has so many?
Well, it's a sense of a meter change. He gives you 8 notes, yeah, and then he organizes it, and I think it also affects the shape of the phrase and how you breathe, how quick, long. Yeah, he's not square here. It's very. There are many short intonations, short replica. Yeah, replique. Yeah, grasping for air. Maybe. Then the B minor, and also I think we should look at how do we get to B minor. We just finished number 2, yeah? And now we finish number 3. And again you have the triad. And again you have this cross. And then, having your F sharp, you continue to the next one.
He always puts a Baroque dance somewhere in his sets. It seems like the Opus 32 preludes have the E major, which for me is a kind of glorious, Bach like violin sonata or something.
Yeah. Well, actually, there is a story behind this one because it's there is a poem about death of a bird, and the story is that Rachmaninoff's daughters. They were given a bird who died. And Rachmaninoff wrote a song, Death of the Bird, which has some quotes with this etude. And this gesture here, like a bird chirping.
The second bird already of the set.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, very probably the least heavy of all of them. Then of course we talked about number 5, and then things get scarier and scarier. And number 6, Wolf and Riding Hood. I already mentioned that it's a very kind of strange plot. To me, it almost feels like this wave of intelligentsia and Rachmaninoff himself fleeing, running away from Bolshevik and from horrors of chaos that come to the country. It's very dark piece. It's very, it's scary, it's desperate, it's anxious, and again. It's just absolutely inevitable. It feels like the wolf will catch you no matter what.
I just think it's so, there's something funny about having Rachmaninoff illustrate this kid's fairy tale. I mean,
I think he was just trying.
I wouldn't have chosen him, if I was a child, but
I would not put it as for kids,
Yeah, it's rated
not
R.
For bedtime.
Yeah.
And then, most important and absolutely not ever played etude from the set, number 7. Here Rachmaninoff gives absolutely clear and detailed description of everything what's going on in this etude in the letter to Respighi. And just this etude makes you think in a little bit different way about this whole endeavor. So he writes in this letter that there is march, there is choir, there is rain, and then it's march again. These are the order of things that are happening in this etude. The idea behind this etude is that this is not just a march, it's a funeral march. He already used, speaking of premonitions that I promised, this is not the original, the very fresh theme. He used it in the Moment Musical. Yeah. And already back then, there was this funeral march coming. Then you have the choir, 3 piano legatissimo. What's interesting about this choir and about this melody is that Rachmaninoff uses the archaic orthodox harmonic progression, which belongs to the chants from old church, so to speak, the church that was demolished during Peter the Great. And there is one opera written about that. This opera called Kovanshina by Mussorgsky, which he never finished. And the scene that he did not finish is the scene of self-immolation by old believers. That scene is on the painting in the Tretyakov gallery, which talks about this episode. There is a mystery behind this scene that the legend says, considering how obsessed and paranoid Mussorgsky was, he did not finish it on purpose, because it would mean the end of the world. For them, it was the end of the world. In Rachmaninoff here, in a way, I don't think it coincidental. It goes by 4 notes. Like, well, he starts here from and then that D natural, the D flat that doesn't fit, because they were thinking in 4, not in 8, not in octaves. The same chord you have in Mussorgsky Gates of Kiev in his pictures. In the also funeral melody choir. Maybe it is a coincidence, maybe not. We don't know. But to me, this piece is the absolute end of the world for Rachmaninoff, for Russia, for the world, and how he saw it. In a way, there's always a speculation why we ask ourselves why Rachmaninoff felt that he did not fit into the 20th century, and maybe he felt a little bit being archaic, like an old faith, old believer, believing in the romantic concept of love and death. Not believing in dissonance of Prokofiev and Stravinsky and Schoenberg and so forth.
And yet the chromaticism is so dense, it's hard to find the tonality.
Yeah, that's the thing that
and
changes as well.
There's also so many ancient elements of chant, right? I mean, that just really, like you said, it feels like it could be 1,000 years ago in some of this music.
Going to D minor. And of course, bells. I forgot about the bells. He says bells at the end. And bells are going in fourth. All those. Another painting example. By the same artist. It's called The Road Through the Wheat. It's a beautiful painting. You also can Google this. You can Google now everything, all these paintings. It's one of my favorite etudes, this one. I never managed to play the way how I would like to hear. But it's absolutely good.
What is it that you want that you haven't achieved?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I know how I don't want to play it. But I guess I'm a little bit struggling with this tempo, vivo. My technique is not good enough, and I hate missing notes there. So that's a shame. But I'll practice. I promise. Next time we meet, I'll play. And then to conclude our
there's some tone-based videos I could recommend if you want to improve your technique.
Yes, absolutely. And to conclude our waste of your viewers' time, the last etude, which is almost, it gives you hope. It gives you this hope that life prevails, and it's in D major. If we treat D minor as a key of death, then D major probably the key of life. Rachmaninoff also gives the description to this etude, to Respighi, Oriental March. There's always this Eastern kind of Oriental tonality in Rachmaninoff music. He loved, or in general in Russia, it was very popular, the Oriental theme. Almost as, we cannot figure out where Russia belongs, to the East or to the West. And as we mentioned already, this is March. Very powerful. This whole thing ends with our famous, beloved phrase. He keeps repeating it. That is all. That is all. Finishing in the most exciting and victorious way. This whole set. So, speaking of etudes, by the end of going through this journey, I don't even consider the word etude to be appropriate. Only if you consider etude as a challenging piece. But there are many challenging pieces written, and they call them rhapsodies, they call them concerti, they call them, ballades, and moments musicaux, they call them preludes, and so forth and so forth. So I think this is the instance, and probably this is the case where pianists or students, young pianists, could take these pieces as pictures, as a beautiful way of expressing their imagination, and not just to have them, to put them on auditions to show their dexterity. But you cannot show your dexterity in many different ways, not necessarily playing fast and clean. See, I cannot play fast and clean, so I have to go for expression. That's all I have. I strongly encourage people.
It's, you don't look that pretty, but you have a great personality.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it's just been an awesome almost 2 hours. I didn't even ask you for this much time, and you gave it to us. So I got lost in these works and this music, and we had so many viewers just strong the whole time who were there with us the whole time. If we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. You can hate mail to us. Would you like to give your email? Yes, hate mail always welcome. But please take a break before however many hours of teaching you're about to do. We really appreciate this. Probably the most profound dive into any body of repertoire that we've done on this channel so far. And there's a whole lot to think about. So
don't exaggerate, Ben. Don't exaggerate.
I say that to all my guests.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't feel special now. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I would like to thank all the viewers for their time, and hope we meet again.
Be well. Stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
Take care.